Good morning. We welcome this new day we've received with song. Hymn number 1008, When Our Heart is in a Holy Place by Joyce Poley. Please make sure your microphone is muted and sing along enthusiastically from home. Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist congregation of Gwinnett. I hope you all had a happy and restful holiday this week. My name is David Morgan. My pronouns are he, they, and it is my great pleasure to lead this worship service today while Reverend Jan is on sabbatical. She will return to the pulpit March 13th. Assisting today as my worship associate is my partner, Annie Bullard. If you have a chalice at home to light with me in a few minutes, please have it ready. We arrive from many places and many life experiences as we gather to recall our true selves, reflect on the meaning of our lives, and explore questions of ultimacy together. We are people who are new to Unitarian Universalism and people who are lifelong Unitarian Universalists. We are people of many religious beliefs and spiritual practices. We affirm and promote the responsible search for truth and meaning. We are people of many genders, sexualities, ethnicities, origins, ages, shapes, sizes, and expressions of our true selves. We affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of all people. We are people of all ages and family structures, and we each bring gifts, talents, and passions that serve to affirm and promote communities with peace, liberty, and justice for all. We are people of covenant who engage with one another in ways that promote and affirm justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. We are people who care deeply for our planet and understand we are inextricably and profoundly connected with the web of all existence. We are people who welcome all who are seeking a community of faith that welcomes your whole self, all that you were, all that you are, all that you yearn to be. And you are just where you should be, in a room full of compassionate, thoughtful, Unitarian Universalists ready to meet you where you are. You are welcome here. You are home. If you're a newcomer this morning, we welcome you and hope you will indeed find your spiritual home here with us. We are becoming a radically welcoming sanctuary in a green space. We foster spiritual growth as we joyfully nurture connections and community within our walls and beyond. If this is your first time here, I encourage you to join us several times to experience the full flavor of this congregation and this faith tradition. Come be curious, courageous, and compassionate with us. Now let's take a deep breath together to become more fully present to this precious time we've set aside to be together this week. As sound vibrates through us and around us, may we be reminded how deeply and profoundly interconnected we are with one another, all humanity, all beings, all living things, and all the stars in the cosmos. For our opening words today, I've chosen the eponymous poem from Pulitzer Prize-winning poet Jericho Brown's most recent collection, The Tradition. Aster, nasturtium, delphinium. We thought fingers in dirt meant it was our dirt. Learning names in heat, in elements classical philosophers said could change us. Stargazer, foxglove. Summer seemed to bloom against the will of the sun, which news reports claimed flamed hotter on this planet than when our dead fathers wiped sweat from their necks. Cosmos, baby's breath. Men like me and my brothers filmed what we planted for proof we existed before too late. Sped the video to see blossoms brought in seconds. Colors you expect in poems where the world ends. Everything cut down. John Crawford, Eric Garner, Mike Brown. Now, as we light our chalice this morning, I'll read words by Paul Sprecher. This is Legacy Chalice Lighting. We light this chalice to honor the memory of those who have come before us, kindling flames of wisdom in dark times, willing to challenge orthodoxy, even at great personal risk, giving us a legacy of freedom and a love of truth, a legacy that warms our hearts and lights our paths. Annie, would you like to open the Wonder Box for us?
It would be my pleasure.
Oh, what's inside?
It looks like a little purse.
Oh, a purse. That must mean our Wonderbox wisdom story for today is A More Graceful Shaboom, a story of someone's quest for a purse, something to hold their many treasures. It's about opening hearts and minds to the many possibilities beyond what's expected and constrained by society. Harmon Jitney had an extravagant collection of belongings, but keeping their belongings orderly was challenging. Harmon's pockets were unusually small for such a task. Pretzel rods and night vision goggles spilled out, leaving trails of trinkets wherever they traveled. There must be a better way to carry snack foods and tokens of appreciation, Harmon speculated. So Harmon tested various solutions. First, they tried out paper bags, only to discover that the bags ripped after 3 uses. Harmon also tried experimenting with wagons, but they flipped while running fast over speed bumps. Harmon nearly gave up the quest until they realized that they had to look further than their own backyard for the answer. The next day, Harmon noticed something new downtown. Purses, sequined purses, luggage purses, dog purses, weekend purses. Everyone with important things to carry seemed to have some kind of purse. Harmon suddenly realized that what they needed was not another paper bag or pocket, but a purse, an all-occasion kind of purse, the sort of satchel someone could take to a party or the playground. Harmon needed a purse to hold a change of flip-flops and underwear. Sometimes you need a change of flip-flops. Accidents happen. But Harmon did not know where to find a purse. When Harmon got home, They asked Mama Millie Mapletush, the solution queen to nearly everything. One of her favorite sayings was, "If it rains outside, we'll just go camping inside." And she would set up waterproof tents in the kitchen. "Mama Millie Mapletush, where can I find a purse?" Harmon's mama was up to her cheeks in her latest at-home invention. She was building an XJ6350 Millennium bipedal astro-welding robot from scratch. Mama Millie was clearly too busy to answer Harmon's question. Harmon sighed and moved on. In the living room, Harmon found Mother Loretta watching the noonday news programs. Harmon knew these programs made her cranky, irritable, and out of touch with reality, and so approached with caution. When not watching news, Mother Loretta was actually a very practical-minded person. One of her favorite sayings was, "When you want to make friends at a party, go around gathering garbage, like stained napkins and gum stuck to the underside of chairs. Within minutes, other partygoers will want to meet the busy party garbage collector." "Mother Loretta, where can I find a purse?" Harmon's mother was up to her nose in news. She was watching a program about the world's biggest bald baby and was clearly too busy to answer Harmon's question. Harmon sighed sadly and moved on. Outside, Harmon found their sister, Ray Shirley Ray, operating her Swift's Sure Specific backhoe. It was rip-roaring loud. Ray Shirley Ray, where can I find a purse?" Harmon's sister did not hear them over the racket she was making. She was up to her ears in dirt and noise pollution. She just thought Harmon was exercising their jaw and waved politely. So Harmon sighed heavily and moved on. Determined to find an answer, Harmon strolled up the avenue and knocked on the door of their neighbor Buck Barkaloo, a costume designer for the rock bands Rodents with Cameras, the Kiss-Ups, Goat Fest, and Scranton Enchantment. One of Buck's favorite sayings was, "Can you please keep your koala from pooping on my azalea bushes?" "Buck," Harmon asked, "where can I find a purse?" "Why do you want a purse?" Buck replied. "The problem is my puny pockets don't hold a thing bigger than a bumblebee's dress. I would like a purse for day or evening, the sort of satchel someone could take to a party or to the playground." "In that case, you are in luck. You've come to the right place and are just in the nick of time. I have purses aplenty and was about to round them up for the local Good Deeds basement yard sale. They are varied and excellent, as they were left here by my favorite French mime band, Brunette Chauffeur. Now let me see where I stashed them." Harmon followed Buck, weaving in and out of various rooms. Behind door number 1, there were no purses. Instead, they found a heaping mound of pencils, sharpened until they were too small to use. Behind door number 2 were several large polar ice caps. Behind door number 3 was a lone single muffin monster who badly needed a hair washing. She sat slumped and sticky, pineapple zest icing speckled on her face. They gave her a hug and promised to return with help. Door number 4 opened easily, outrolled 142 million summer peas and 66,500 Brussels sprouts covered in spinach. Harmon suddenly remembered a seemingly sensationalist noonday news program about children who covertly built tunnels connecting the underside of dinner tables to one central disposal cauldron. Buck Barkaloo, claiming he had never even heard of Brussels sprouts, shut the door swiftly and jogged down the hall, still in search of purses. Doors 5, 6, 7, and 8 were willy-nilly collections of polka dots, home economics homework, invisible stars, garage door openers, and Hollywood nights. Not one tiny, measly purse. Door number 9 would not budge, but chunky almond butter oozed from the keyhole. Buck Barkaloo tried door number 10, but it would not open. Buck had a set of keys and attempted every one. The last key, when turned sideways and clockwise twice, opened the lock. Behind the now open door was a heavy velvet curtain. It took both of their strengths to part it, and when they did, they saw a cavernous collection of perfect, pristine purses, each one more preferred than the previous. And there, in a quiet corner, the most precious purse of all, a plushy, elegant purple radio purse, a purse that had a built-in radio that Harmon could listen to the hits of the 80s, 90s, and today on. A purse that was purple, Harmon's favorite color. A purse that was plushy, crafted with fine imported plush from Grancy-le-Chateau Nouvelle, France, home of the aforementioned French mime band. Jitney did a little victory dance, knowing that not a single more perfect plushy purse could be found in modern times. Harmon thucked Buck Barkaloo and skipped home. The items Harmon put in their purse at first were sparing: Mama Millie's expired driver's license, the keys to all of Shirley Ray's forts, and strawberry mango lip balm. Days later, Harmon added underwear, a bagel in a bag, and a picture of snow, a fairly light load. Before long, Harmon Jitney filled the plushy purple radio purse with grander, more impressive items: several rolls of toilet paper, Grandpa Quackenbush's collection of rare dessert recipes, 4 trays of pizzas. The purse grew bigger, and everything seemed to fit. When Harmon realized the purse had ample legroom, they invited their friend Nettie June Carter Shinkman to ride in with her bicycle. The purse grew even bigger. When Harmon began to understand the potential of the purse, they tried bulkier items: a canopy bed, a dinosaur named Eric, 285 years of heirloom seed catalogs, and then in went the village of Cheesetown, Pennsylvania. It all fit. The purse grew bigger and bigger. With ease, Harmon fit in their 5th grade class, except for Graciela Fartinelli III. She was out sick with pigeon pox that day. Harmon did not stop there. Into the purse went the polar ice caps, the lone single muffin monster, an open-air flea market that had once been a drive-in movie theater, and a monster truck caravan. A wave of inspiration overtook Harmon as the massive capacity of the purse came into focus. All at once, Harmon gently squished the entire earth, and then the universe, into the purse. Then Harmon climbed smack dollop into the middle of the purse and proclaimed, "I sure hope somebody is writing this down." Now Harmon had a favorite saying, too. When the last olive-sized detail of the entire world was coaxed into Harmon Jitney's purse, it snapped shut with a big, hotter upper smasherific bang, followed by a more graceful shaboom. All around, there was a stillness, unlike anything Harmon had ever known. Immersed in dark and library quiet, Harmon felt around for a light switch. Their hand brushed briefly over a fruitcake before finding a switch. When Harmon flipped on the lights, the contents of the purse became illuminated. What they saw was magnificent. Harmon gazed upon jazz dancers of every size, puppies holding babies, unicorns leaping over rainbow archways. There were gorgeous garments and great-great-grandparents and a sparrowhawk resting on an outstretched, glittery glove. A growing smile melted its way across Harmon's face. Harmon Jitney reached through a pocket-sized hole at the top of the purse, feeling the familiar air of the outside world. "Just checking," Harmon said to Shirley Ray and Nettie June Carter Shinkman, there by Harmon's side. A disco ball dropped from a rain cloud. A jukebox whirred on. Within arm's length, a dolphin leaped from a turquoise ocean. Harmon Jitney found themselves in a noble ballroom, surrounded by cake trees and everything else they had ever needed. Harmon had finally found what they had been looking for all along. They began to dance. I sure hope somebody is writing this down. And now let's sing. Hymn number 108, My Life Flows On, an Endless Song. These are traditional words set to music by Robert Lowry.
I Our reading today is Reframing Your Past and Dwelling in Possibilities by Madeline Johnson. The narrative you tell yourself about yourself is the operating system that gets you through life. It's the track that keeps playing inside your head, telling you to go this way and that way. It's what navigates you through life. Your brain travels with you all day long. Within your brain is a library of lifelong learning and all the history about yourself. This history is your memories. These memories are the stories of what happened to you in the past, and although they may feel real as you recall them, they are not necessarily accurate depictions of what truly happened. In the past 10 years, neuroscience has discovered that these memories that you actually have change every time you think about them. Every time you pull up a memory, it changes as you share it in the present moment. The memory becomes new with the emotions and the situation that you are feeling in the present moment. The very act of remembering can change your memories and reform your story about the past. Now, your brain does another thing that is very important to your survival. The brain is here to simulate, adjust, and constantly change to help us have better versions of our lives. With this in mind, your brain tries to predict the future. This is what dreams and decisions do. This is their role. When you're dreaming and when you're thinking, your brain tries to simulate the future and make predictions about what will happen next. And right now, here you are in the sliver of time called the present moment. Here is where you control everything: what you eat, do, say, see, feel, how you interact with the world. The great thing about being in the present moment is that you interact with everything around you, and you can change things about yourself and your life right here in the present. When you are in the present moment and you begin to think about a past memory, your memory becomes modified by the present moment. It changes as you recall it, and you actually have a new version of that memory. A memory that is not what really happened, but a newer version of what happened. These malleable memories are a significant discovery because it means we can actually change our memories and in turn change our past and ultimately change the story we tell ourselves about ourselves. We have the power to change what happened in the past to empower us to move forward. When we do this, we give our memories new meaning. We can manipulate the story about that memory to make us move forward in a new way, by changing the meaning and significance of what happened to us. To realize that you have the choice to reinvent the memories that you have to make you stronger is a truly enlightening and empowering thing. You can change the experience of everything, including the meaning you give it, and this in turn changes your version of your current story and ultimately reality. The end result is that we control the stories that we have about ourselves and realize that we don't have to be controlled by the experiences we've had. It is immensely freeing. We can actually make ourselves happy. We can make bad things look better. It is all done by the virtue of telling ourselves a different story. Look at the memory differently. Save it back in your brain as a new memory. We have this ability to change the story every single time we think about it. Combine this action of making new memories from the past with more empowering thoughts and messages and a devotion to continual learning about ourselves, and we begin to push ourselves to have new experiences. All of this activity creates for us a completely different life. The story you tell yourself, the narrative you listen to in your mind, might be a story of suffering and inadequacy, a story of not being good enough, a story about failing. This depressing story will literally become your story, your reality, and your identity. But remember, you have the power to change that story, to tell yourself a new one so that you can achieve more of what you want. Now we'll have a bit of music for reflection. Here is the song Half Acre by the band Hymn.
I am holding half an acre scrap of paper is a land I grew. Think of every town you've lived in, every room you lay your head, and what is it that you remember? Do you carry every sadness with you? Every hour your heart was broken, every night the fear and darkness lay down with A man is walking on the highway. A woman stares out at the sea. And light is only now just breaking. So we carry every sadness with us. Every hour our hearts were broken. Every night the fear and darkness lay down with us. I am holding half an acre, torn map of Michigan. I am carrying this scrap of paper. I can crack the darkest sky wide open. Every burden taken from me. Every night my heart unfolding, my heart.
Good morning again. The psychiatrist Bessel van der Kolk was interviewed recently by Krista Tippett for her show On Being. His book, The Body Keeps the Score, has found its way back to the bestsellers lists this year, as so many of us look for help in processing the trauma we've experienced during the pandemic. Fairly early in the interview, Tippett raises the issue of how trauma distorts memory. She observes, memories are never precise recollections, but in general, as we move through the world, memories become integrated and transformed into stories that help us make sense. But that in the case of traumatic memories, they're not integrated, and they're not even really remembered as much as they're relived. Van der Kolk agrees with her and explains further, many victims over time, he says, get to tell a story to explain why they are so messed up. But the nature of a traumatic experience is that the brain doesn't allow a story to be created. And here you have an interesting paradox, that it's normal to distort your memories. Like, I'm 1 out of 5 kids, he says. When we have a family reunion, we all tell our stories about our own childhood, and everybody always listens to everybody else's story and says, did you grow up in the same family I did? What's so extraordinary about trauma is that these images or sounds or physical sensations don't change over time, so it's normal to change. There's a famous study, Van der Kolk explains to her, called the Grant Study, where they followed participants from the Harvard classes of 1939 to 1944, and that study is still going on to this day. Those people are given questionnaires every 2 years, and they're interviewed every 5 years. Most of them went off to war in 1942, and almost all of them came back in 1945, and they've continued to be interviewed since. And it turns out that the people who did not develop PTSD, which is the vast majority, tell very different stories, let's say in 1990, than they did back in 1945. So now it's a glorious experience, and it was a growth experience, and how cool it was, how close they were to people, how patriotic they felt. And it's all sort of cleaned up, but it's very coherent. It's a nice story. It's a good story to listen to. People who got traumatized, Van der Kolk explains, continue to have the same story in 1990 as they told back in 1945. They cannot transform it. I've been thinking a lot about these issues recently, about history and memory and stories. After having spent the last 25 years in my first career as an English professor, I made the decision to go back to graduate school at Candler School of Theology to get my Master of Divinity degree so that I could be ordained and serve as a UU minister. As part of that process, I've been asked over and over again to tell different pieces of the story of my life. Not just what brought me to Unitarian Universalism or what convinced me to pursue ministry, also what patterns occurred in my family, what shaped my sense of self. Stories like that. One of the stories I used to tell about my childhood was that I was a big reader growing up because I was seeking to escape from my terrible family. I read all the time when I was a child, and I especially loved fantasy and science fiction stories. When I was in first grade, my mother fell asleep reading The Hobbit, so I nipped the book away from her and started reading it myself. I'm sure some of it went right over my head, but I fell in love with the story, and as soon as I finished it, went looking for more like it. Eventually, those books led me into both role-playing games and into all sorts of other genres, too. I read pretty much anything I could get my hands on. The summer after graduating from high school, I took up running a couple of miles almost every day to the public library. Then I'd spend an hour or so trying to make my way through Immanuel Kant's Critique of Pure Reason, because I had read somewhere that it was the greatest work of philosophy ever, so I figured I needed to understand it. I couldn't make much sense of it, but I kept reading because I figured at some point it would spill its secrets to me. But I still, even as I was reading Kant, I thought of this reading as mere escapism. I was reading, at that point, high literature for my classes, but the story I told myself was that it was all just useless stories, evidence that I had my head in the clouds, or that I just wanted to be anywhere other than where I was. I never gave myself or the authors I was reading a whole lot of credit. At some point in college, that narrative shifted. I started to understand that my childhood had not just been crappy, but that it had been abusive. I started to find out that it wasn't normal to be left entirely alone to raise myself and my disabled younger brother without any guidance from my parents. And as I did, I began to realize that those books I had been reading were not merely escapist fantasies, but that they had served in place of my parents to help me to make sense of myself and the world around me. I learned important ethical lessons from Tolkien and Isaac Asimov, Frank Herbert, Ursula Le Guin, Michael Moorcock, and from the X-Men comic books that I loved. I especially learned empathy and respect for myself and others, which were not lessons that I was learning at home. I also started to recognize that even the simplest escapist fantasy novels I had read as a child were serving a really important function for me. Those books showed me that it was possible to live a life that was radically different from the one that I knew. One of the ways in which trauma harms us is that it makes it difficult to imagine that things will ever get any better, which I definitely struggled with. I clearly had a sense of a foreshortened future as a child, such that I found it incredibly difficult to imagine surviving into adulthood. From the vantage point of my 20s, I came to see that all the reading I did helped me to combat that fatalist view, because somewhere deep down, I always understood that I had the potential to change and that adventure might be around the next corner. Recently, I've shifted that narrative of my childhood relationship with reading again. I'd always talked about the way I would read anything I could get my hands on, and I had always remembered spending whole days hidden in the stacks of public libraries or in the corners of used bookstores as a child, but I hadn't really thought about how undirected this reading was. Pretty much everything about my childhood was undirected, so maybe I just hadn't really thought about it. But now, after years of teaching some pretty smart young people in my college classes, I've come to realize how strange my reading habits were. Not just in the genres that I read, but in lots of other ways too. As a young boy, I read lots of books written by women, which I've only fairly recently come to understand is not the norm. I've already mentioned Ursula Le Guin, who was a particular favorite of mine, but also Andre Norton, Anne McCaffrey, Margaret Weiss, and then Louisa May Alcott, Laura Ingalls Wilder, Dickinson, Austen, Woolf, and so on. I also read many books by Native American and African American authors, which I've also come to understand is fairly uncommon for a white child. I wasn't seeking out books by people of color or women as some sort of diversity project. I was simply looking for books that helped me to understand what I was going through. And quite frequently, the characters that I identified with were women or people of color. I didn't have a parent directing me about what I should or shouldn't read or instructing me on where I was supposed to try to fit in. So I just followed my interests and needs. I've never fit very well into any of the categories that were applied to me. I present as a straight, white, middle-class, cisgendered male, but none of those terms really apply very well. It's true that I have degrees from an Ivy League university, but I've also got a degree from a community college. I wonder now whether part of the reason that I'm so much of a liminal figure is because I was raised by books, and the books I read were from all over the place. I also wonder sometimes whether I'm actually any more liminal than anyone else. I suspect that most of us were presented long ago with some pretty narrow boxes within which we were supposed to define ourselves. And those narrow binaries became fixed before we could really understand how ill-fitting they were. But once we convinced ourselves to inhabit those labels, it became difficult to question them. I suspect that Madeline Johnson is correct in the essay that Annie read earlier, that we have far more power to remember our past and to think about it differently, and to decide to change who we are. In big and small ways, the stories that we tell ourselves about who we are can be more expansive and more flexible than we are prone to recognize. With each of the successive stories I've told myself about what happened to me in my childhood and how I managed to survive it, and more than survive it, I've spiraled outward toward a healthier, deeper self-understanding. It was a slow and sometimes difficult process of remembering and recontextualizing. At first, I resisted shifting those narratives. I think more than anything, I felt a sense of loyalty to those early understandings, maybe even a sense of loyalty to my family and where I came from that kept me from thinking differently. Like the people with PTSD that Bessel van der Kolk mentioned in his interview with Krista Tippett, I was holding on to a story that kept me trapped. But when I began to look at those events from different and wider perspectives, with the benefits of the experiences I'd gone through as an adult, I became more and more myself. And now it's time for sharing our joys and sorrows. Here we strive to create a model of beloved community. We do this in part through the care and support of one another. We each arrive here holding joys and sorrows, triumphs and disappointments. So we set aside time in this communal space to honor that which we carry on our hearts, to celebrate together and to grieve together. If you would like your joy or sorrow shared aloud in the service, please share it in the chat space on Zoom, and Christiana will read them aloud as Annie lights a candle of compassion to lift your joy or sorrow into the collective consciousness. I invite us now to enter into a time of silent reflection as we create a container of compassion to hold our joys and our sorrows. Into this container, we offer that which is most on our hearts to share with this beloved and supportive community. We light one more candle for those joys and sorrows that remain held in the sanctuary of the heart. May we hold one another with compassion and loving kindness. Amen. Please join me in singing hymn number 1011, Return Again by Shlomo Carlebach. Our congregation is committed to creating a more compassionate world. To this end, each quarter we split our plate collections with an organization nominated by people in the congregation and selected by our Give Away the Plate committee. Our fourth quarter plate recipient is Lost and Found Youth, a remarkable nonprofit organization that seeks to alleviate homelessness for LGBTQ young adults ages 18 to 25. They provide temporary housing, food, clothing, case management, counseling, life training skills, job readiness training, linkages to physical and mental health care, and recreational opportunities. Our plate contributions also support the shared ministry of this congregation, so I ask that you please give generously to support the work of this important ministry in our wider community, as well as the vision and mission of our congregation. As we listen to our pianist Brian Bishop playing Try to Remember from the Fantastics by Tom Jones and Harvey Schmidt, you will see on the screen ways to contribute to our offering via PayPal, Venmo, or by mailing a check payable to UUCG to the address shown. If you're worshiping with us for the first time, your presence here today is a generous gift to this community. You may choose to let the plate pass. The offering will now be most gratefully received. Beautiful, thank you. May the generous gifts received this week move us towards realizing our vision of a more connected and compassionate world. Please join me in offering gratitude this morning. I'm grateful for our worship associate, my beloved Annie Bullard, who offered to jump in and help out today. Thank you also to Brian Bishop for offering his gift of music. I'm also grateful to this morning's tech team. Christiana McQueen served as our Zoom manager, and Justin Miller and Alex Hebda managed our video and sound. Thank you all so much. Now is the time for our call to connection within our congregation and beyond our walls. If you're new to our congregation and you haven't done so yet, please sign up for our weekly e-news and monthly newsletter by sending an email to info@uucg.org. If you'd like to watch past services, you can go to our YouTube channel, which is there. Our 2022 pledge drive is still collecting pledges and support. You can click on the Make a Pledge of Support on the UUCG website homepage in order to send in your pledge if you haven't done so yet. Please do so. If you're looking for a way to be of service, the food collection for the Lawrenceville Cooperative Ministry is on the first Sunday of each month, so that's coming up next week from 2 to 4 p.m. And also Corley Elementary is, we're doing a collection for the teacher appreciation at Corley Elementary. They are looking for gift cards for Aldi's or Walmart in $10, $15, $20, or $25 increments. You can make contributions through UUCG's PayPal or Venmo account and just designate those gifts as Corley. Or starting next week, when we're back in person, there will be a drop-off box where you can put your gift cards there, and they'll be distributed to the elementary school. Our faith development programs for parents of preschoolers meets once a month on a weekday evening. And the elementary religious exploration is on the first and third Sundays from 12:30, starting at 12:30 on Zoom for ages 5 to 10. And the adults and teens meet Sundays at 10. You can register at our website. I don't have a slide for this, but also the Radical Welcome Study Hall begins on December the 3rd. It's an opportunity to come together and discuss social justice and ways to put our faith into action. It's hosted by Barbara Stanke, the lay minister for Radical Welcome. Please check the e-news and the UUCG website and calendar for other ways to connect. Oops. There will be no tarot meeting today at 5 p.m. And final announcement, we will begin meeting in person on Sunday mornings again next weekend, December 5th. Christiana, I think, will be placing a link in the chat to find more information about that. And now, please rise in spirit as we say together the words we say as we extinguish our chalice, followed by singing hymn number 311, Let It Be a Dance by Rick Maston. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Let
Closing words for today are by the Reverend Scott Taylor, remembering that we do not walk alone. May we remember that we never walk out into the world alone. We stand on the shoulders of brave and generous ones who have gone before. We walk beside companions ready to catch us when we fall. We hold memories of dear ones in our hearts who keep us connected to our center. May we make this our most important work, to remember that who we are does not end at the edges of our own skin. Our service is ended, and now our service to one another and our wider communities begins. Be well, beloveds. Continue to wear your masks, get vaccinated if you haven't already, and reach out to connect with others.